Thank you, Chris, and thank you to Congressman Pettinger and to JC for having me and arranging this conference every year here in D.C. and also so frequently during the year. It's great to be with you and see a number of you again. Great to be with my fellow panelists here. I think it was interesting that we heard a number of panels this morning talk about digital assets already, right off the bat with illicit finance, and then culminating with David Malpass's great talk just now. Although I think as we think about that, they focused on how, at least initially in the first panel, how digital assets can be used within illicit finance. But also, if you think about it, and if you listen as closely as I did, how that use advantages law enforcement in tracing, tracking, and seizing the proceeds or value of criminals and criminal networks. And I think as opposed to focusing on kind of criminals using different things, including digital assets, what I'd like to focus on right now for the first 5-7 minutes of this panel and my presentation is the opportunity that digital assets present. Because if we think about national security, economic prosperity is economic security, and economic security is national security. And I think the more that everyone realizes the true benefits of digital assets, the more they can understand the economic impact that they create for their own countries and their own citizens. So I'd like to give kind of a primer, which I gave here 2 years ago, but I think it sets a good stage to how to think about where we've been, where we can go to, and where we are right now. So kind of a past, then a future, and then bring it back to the present, and then let my distinguished panelists put a lot more meat on the bones there. I think if we think back to when Bitcoin was created, why was that an important thing? What did it do that was powerful? That creation allowed for a unique digital item to exist. Up until that time, you couldn't have anything that was both unique and digital, because anything that was digital could be copied infinitely and traded infinitely. So the process of creating what became known as Bitcoin created something that was both digital and unique, which meant that it could have value if it was ascribed value by a marketplace. But then there were other advantages to how it was created. It could be accessed globally. It could be settled immediately, instantaneously, and it could be transferred from stranger to stranger without an intermediary being present. You think about that, that's the first time in the history of the world, of civilization, and of value transfer that those three things could happen at the same time. And then as blockchains advanced, as more innovation came to exist, we saw things like the Ethereum blockchain and other blockchains, which added smart contracts on top of that. So instead of a blockchain only being used to validate the transaction of one token, now a blockchain could be used for composability. Right? The analogy I like to use is Bitcoin was having a piece of gold in your pocket, and the Ethereum blockchain or other blockchains are now like having an iPhone in your pocket. They're a developer tool, which means you can make markets on them. You can create and value digital intellectual property. You can now transfer dollars in a stable way, in the same way that you could transfer Bitcoin, globally, instantaneously, peer-to-peer. That is a very, very powerful thing, and it has allowed for us to now think about how the internet can evolve from a Web 1 vision of when it was created to a Web 3 version of what it could be in the future. And where Web 1 was a read-only internet, we took things from the physical world and we put them online and we engaged with them on a one-on-one basis, right? That was a open internet. It was a permissionless internet, much like a lot of blockchain interactions are today. Then when we moved to Web 2, it was a read and write internet. It became an internet of social networks, right? Of connections, of digital intellectual content being posted by individuals. but it became a closed system. It became a network owned by corporations, where they took the value of that network's intellectual property and community. And now we can get to the idea of an internet that is a read, write, and own internet, an idea popularized by Chris Dixon at A16Z, a firm I've had the pleasure of working with the last 4 years, where you have the network of Web 2, but you have the ownership through tokenization of your digital intellectual property and a return to the permissionless nature of Web 1. Right? That's a pretty powerful force. And as economies and jurisdictions around the world embrace individual entrepreneurship and individualized innovation, that is a platform that I think can unleash an immense amount of economic good. So that's the future. And where are we now in the present? Well, I think in the United States, at least, we have moved from a period in the last administration of aggressive lawfare against the crypto industry and abuse of power by the regulators to an environment where there is I think, a sense of unbridled innovation and entrepreneurship, of seeking and using and exploring the contours of digital assets and blockchains in almost any way imaginable. Whether that is through a Web3 version or exploration, or whether that's through more of a financialization, turbocharged financialized marketplaces. And we have the intersection of both of those things happening now. We have a lot of growth in different areas. We have a lot of speculative use cases. We have a lot of real-world use cases. We have a lot of financial use cases. And I think a lot of my colleagues will explore some of those today. But that's kind of a quick primer, I think, of where we've been, where we can go, and where we are right now. And so with that, I'll turn it back to you.